Under the violet wash of studio lights, the Graham Norton show set gleamed like a jewel box. Every surface, from the curved scarlet sofa to the polished black stage floor, was designed for charm. The audience filed in, laughter already bubbling, unaware that tonight's show would be remembered not for its wit but for its collision. Graham sat behind the desk, flipping his cue cards with the casual precision of a man who'd done this 1,000 times. His reputation rested on warmth wrapped in mischief. He could tease a prime minister or a pop star and make it sound like affection. Producers called it the velvet dagger. It never failed until tonight. From behind the curtain, assistants moved in quick, efficient bursts. One adjusted the floral arrangement. Another checked the floor tape where the guest would stop for the opening handshake. At stage right, a stylist gave last-minute notes in a hushed American accent. She wants the lighting softened when she walks out. Slightly warmer tone. The floor manager nodded, uncertain whether to question a request from royalty or former royalty. Backstage, Meghan Markle waited. Her emerald green dress shimmered under the dressing room bulbs, every fold calculated to photograph perfectly. She inhaled once, slow and deliberate, the way she had before red carpet interviews in another life. The air smelled faintly of hairspray and studio heat. She knew the rhythm of television: smile, pause, charm, retreat. But this was British television, and the man she was about to face wasn't easily charmed. Out on stage, Graham flashed his grin to the audience. "Tonight," he began, voice gliding across the room, "we've got music, mischief, and a guest who knows a thing or two about headlines. Please welcome Meghan Markle." Applause erupted, loud but uneven, like a crowd applauding because it must. The curtain parted. Meghan stepped into the light. Camera's word. Her posture was flawless, chin lifted, one hand raised in a wave that felt rehearsed yet strangely regal. She crossed the stage with measured strides, her heels clicking like punctuation marks on polished wood. Graham rose to greet her. "A kiss left, a kiss right, television courtesy. Lovely to see you." "And you, Graham," she replied smoothly. The audience watched them take their seats. There was an energy between them, static, polite, dangerous. Two professionals, each used to controlling the room. Graham leaned back, cards in hand. "So, Meghan, the world's been keeping busy talking about you. You must be single-handedly keeping the tabloids afloat." Polite laughter. Meghan's smile tightened a fraction. "I prefer to think I'm keeping journalism alive." He chuckled, tapping his cue cards against his knee. "Touché." For a moment, it felt playful. Then she added, "Though sometimes I wonder which parts of the press are still interested in truth." The air shifted, barely perceptible, but real. Graham's brow arched. "Well, we do try to stick to entertainment here. Unless you'd like to make headlines again tonight." Her smile stayed fixed. "Only if you insist." The audience laughed again, louder this time. But there was an undercurrent. Was she joking? Was he? Graham moved on. "You've settled in California now, haven't you? Sunshine, palm trees, freedom from drizzle. Sounds idyllic." Meghan crossed one leg over the other, her jewelry catching the light. "It's peaceful. A different kind of noise. A profitable kind." Graham quipped. A ripple of laughter ran through the crowd. Meghan's eyes flicked toward the audience, then back to him. "You're funny. You make it sound like peace needs to be earned." "Well," Graham said, his grin widening, "doesn't it?" She tilted her head. "Some people pay for it with silence, others with honesty." The laughter died. You could feel the collective inhale. Graham nodded slowly, almost impressed by the counterpunch. "Well, then," he said lightly, "I suppose we'll see which currency holds its value." The band's keyboardist coughed into his sleeve, uncertain whether to cue the next sting. Graham changed lanes. "Let's talk work. You've produced, narrated, advocated. There's talk of a new documentary." "Yes," Meghan said quickly. "It's about identity, empathy, and how media narratives shape public perception." He smiled. "So, media bad, empathy good." The audience laughed again, nervous laughter, the kind that fills silence so it doesn't collapse. Meghan's expression hardened, though her voice remained calm. Not bad, Graham. Just powerful. And power should come with accountability. Accountability, he echoed. Big word for a Friday night. The audience chuckled, but the charm was thinning. For years, Graham Norton had made his living towing the line between cheek and cruelty. But tonight the line was razor-thin. Every quip drew blood. He tried another angle. Would you ever consider acting again? Or has the real world given you enough drama? The crowd laughed. Meghan didn't. The real world doesn't pay residuals, she said coolly. He grinned. No, but it provides endless sequels. Something in her gaze shifted, amusement to irritation. I suppose you'd know, since you're still on the same stage after all these years. The audience gasped softly. Graham's lips curved in a polite smile, but his eyes sharpened. Consistency, my day. Some of us call it a career. The laughter that followed was uneasy, unsure whose side it belonged to. Meghan looked out toward the audience as if seeing through them. You're very good at this, she said. At what? Deflection. A murmur ran through the room. Graham set his cards down deliberately. And you're very good at confrontation. That's what happens when people mistake curiosity for cruelty. Oh, I assure you, I'm only curious. About what exactly? How far you can push before someone walks off. The studio lights hummed overhead. Even the cameraman seemed frozen. Graham's smile remained, but his tone cooled. I've had tougher guests. Meghan's reply came like ice. I doubt that. The pause that followed was the kind television producers dread and audiences live for. Long enough to be real. Long enough to hurt. Then Graham broke it with a laugh that didn't quite reach his eyes. Well, that's the joy of live television. Anything can happen. He reached for his glass of water, taking a slow sip while never breaking eye contact. The audience shifted in their seats, sensing something invisible tighten. In the control room, a producer whispered to another, Do we cut to commercial? Not yet, came the reply. This is gold. Back on stage, Graham changed tone again, softer now. You've spoken about mental health, resilience, finding your voice. Do you feel you've been heard? Meghan hesitated. For the first time, a flicker of vulnerability appeared. People hear what they want to hear. But I've said my piece. And the critics, he pressed gently. Do you listen to them? I try not to, though sometimes their silence says more than their words. He nodded, pretending to empathize, but then added, silence can also be agreement. Her jaw tightened, or exhaustion. The exchange was surgical now, each word a precise incision. From the back row, a man coughed. The sound echoed too loudly. Someone laughed nervously. Graham leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Forgive me for asking, but do you ever miss it? The royal family? The titles? The tradition? The stage? The stage. Well, it is all performance, isn't it? Bows, waves, rehearsed smiles. Her eyes hardened. It's service, or at least, it's supposed to be. And you didn't find that fulfilling. I found it suffocating. He nodded slowly. And yet, here you are. Cameras, audience, questions. Not so different, is it? That depends who's asking the questions. He smiled faintly. Touché again. But inside, something in him flared. She wasn't playing by his rules. For 15 minutes, the interview continued in this rhythm. Question, answer, counterpunch. The laughter became rarer, the silences longer. What began as playful fencing now resembled a duel without swords. The studio could feel it, a gathering storm disguised as conversation. At one point, Graham turned to the audience for relief. She's good, isn't she? He said. The audience clapped, relieved to be told what to do. Meghan smiled, but her eyes didn't soften. When he looked back at her, she was already waiting, ready for the next strike. He obliged. You've spoken often about truth. But truth, as we know, has many versions. Which one should we believe? Believe whichever one you can handle, she said quietly. Her tone was low but dangerous, the kind that made the microphones tremble. Graham's grin faded. Oh, I can handle plenty. Then ask better questions. The crowd gasped. Someone muttered, "Oh wow," under their breath. For a heartbeat, Graham said nothing. Then, softly, noted. He shuffled his cards again, though he no longer needed them. The questions had become irrelevant. The real story was unfolding in real time. For a moment, neither host nor guest moved. The air itself felt charged, like the pause between thunder and lightning. Graham adjusted a cufflink that didn't need adjusting. Meghan traced a finger along the seam of the crimson sofa, her posture impeccable, her expression unreadable. The audience sat in the delicate paralysis that only live television can create, afraid to laugh, afraid not to. Graham broke the silence first. "So," he said with exaggerated brightness, "shall we lighten it up? Favorite British food? Don't say avocado toast. You'll ruin our national pride." Laughter, thin, brittle, skipped through the room. Meghan's smile returned, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Fish and chips, obviously. I'm practically British now. Remember?" "Ah yes," he replied smoothly, just missing the passport and the affection of the press. The audience gasped, then laughed because they were supposed to. Graham's grin was dazzling. His tone was still playful, but the edge underneath could have cut glass. Meghan's reply came after a heartbeat. "Funny. I thought affection here had to be owned by silence." He leaned back, pretending to consider it. "Or perhaps by humor. We do prefer our heroes with a sense of one. I prefer mine with a conscience." The words fell like a stone into water. Ripples spread, whispers, a cough, a stifled laugh. The camera's red light burned hotter. Graham's eyes narrowed slightly. "Touché. I'll grant you that one." She inclined her head, victory subtle but visible. From the control booth, a producer whispered, "Keep it going, it's brilliant." Another muttered, "It's dangerous." On stage, Graham shuffled his cards again, though the questions now served as props, not prompts. "Tell me, Meghan," he said lightly, "you've lived a few lives, actress, duchess, humanitarian, producer. Which one fits best?" "The honest one," she said. "And which is that tonight?" "Depends which version you're selling," she shot back. A collective ooh rolled through the audience. Graham laughed, but the sound was tighter now. "I'm not selling anything, Day. That's your department." Her smile froze, then melted into something colder. "It must be exhausting, Graham, keeping up that charm while pretending it's kindness." A murmur ran through the seats. Even the band shifted uneasily. Graham's expression didn't falter, but the temperature of his voice dropped. "Pretending? No, no. The trick is believing it's real." The audience laughed uncertainly, desperate to diffuse the tension that now crackled across the stage. "Belief," Meghan said softly, "is what keeps fairy tales alive. Until the credits roll." He studied her. "You speak from experience. I speak from survival." "Ah, so tonight you're the survivor." "Tonight," she said, "I'm the only one without a script." That one landed. The red light blinked. The sound operator mouthed wow. For years, Graham had thrived on spontaneity, those unscripted bursts that made his show feel alive. But this was different. This was someone rewriting the show around him. He shifted forward, elbows on his knees. "Let's be honest, Meghan. You knew exactly what tonight would be. You walked in with your story polished and packaged. So don't pretend surprise when people ask questions." Her voice didn't rise, but the steel in it did. "Questions are fine. Condescension isn't." "Oh, I see," he said mildly. "I'm condescending because I don't agree with the narrative. You're condescending because you think disagreement makes you clever." The audience inhaled again. Laughter flickered and died. Somewhere, a phone buzzed, then went silent. No one dared look. Graham smiled thinly. "And you think indignation makes you interesting?" The orchestra leader at the side glanced at his cue sheet, then at the floor manager. Should they cut to commercial? The floor manager shook her head. "Let it play out." Meghan's expression hardened. "You wanted honesty. Here it is. I'm tired of men who mistake interrogation for conversation." Graham's laugh was short. "And I'm tired of guests who confuse interviews with coronations." A gasp, louder this time. For a second, both seemed to realize they'd crossed from wit to war. He leaned back again, voice softer but sharper. We both play to audiences, don't we? Difference is, mine knows when to stop clapping. Her chin lifted. Yes, yours stop when you tell them to. He smiled. Control, darling. Someone has to have it. Apparently, you need it more than most. The back and forth had turned surgical now, each phrase a blade drawn with precision. From the front row, a woman covered her mouth, eyes wide. This wasn't the kind of tension the Graham Norton show sold. It was the kind that made sponsors nervous and viewers glued. Graham decided to pivot. He lifted the next card. Let's talk legacy. What do you hope people will remember about you 10 years from now? That I didn't let people like you define me. He blinked once. People like me. You know exactly what I mean. Oh, enlighten me. I adore a stereotype. The polite cynic, she said. The man who hides behind laughter because empathy might make him vulnerable. The words landed heavier than any insult. For the first time, Graham's grin faltered, just for a fraction of a second. You've been doing interviews, he said quietly, a long time. You know how this works. I ask questions, you answer. That's the dance. She leaned in. And what happens when the partner stops dancing? His eyes locked on hers. Then the music stops. The air went still. Maybe it should, she murmured. In the control room, the director whispered, Jesus. The audience sat motionless. Some crossed their arms, as if bracing for the sound of something breaking. Graham exhaled through his nose, then stood, walking toward the desk for his glass of water. The cameras tracked him. He turned back. You know, you remind me of early guests, actors who believed the spotlight was oxygen. They never realized it burns as well as it shines. Meghan's eyes followed him coolly. And yet here you are, lighting the matches. He took a slow sip. Someone has to keep the audience warm. The audience laughed again, grateful for the release. But the laughter was shorter now, edges frayed by discomfort. Graham returned to his chair. Tell me something real, Meghan. What's the hardest part of walking away from an empire? The people who pretend they wanted you to stay. And the easiest. Moments like this. The audience let out a startled laugh that sounded half relieved, half scandalized. Careful, Graham said, smiling again. If you keep this up, I'll run out of cards. You ran out of grace 10 minutes ago. He froze, smile fixed. A beat later, he chuckled. You should write for the show. She tilted her head. I'd have to lower my standards. The laughter came again, wild now, nervous energy ricocheting around the studio. Behind the band, one of the horn players mouthed to another, she's winning. Graham saw it, and for the first time in his long career, he felt something alien on his own stage, defensiveness. He leaned forward again, voice soft, dangerous. You know, Meghan, everyone says you want control. But sometimes, losing it is the most human thing a person can do. Her expression didn't change. Then by all means, you first. The crowd erupted. Gasps, laughter, the sound of people realizing they were watching something that couldn't be undone. Graham smiled tightly, eyes glinting under the lights. Touché again. You on quite a streak. Don't worry, she said. It'll end when I decide it does. The sound engineer swore under his breath. Every syllable was crystal clear in the monitors, every bar perfectly preserved. The director whispered, We need a break. Give it 30 seconds, the producer answered. She's about to push him. And she did. Meghan's tone softened, almost tender. You know, Graham, I used to like your show. You had this ability to make people feel safe while you teased them. But tonight, it feels like you needed someone to humiliate. He blinked, genuinely thrown. Humiliate? My dear, if that's humiliation, you've clearly never watched British politics. The audience laughed, but it was a hollow sound, relief disguised as amusement. Meghan didn't flinch. I've seen politics. I'm married into it. Graham's retort died in his throat. The studio held its breath again. She continued, voice steady. And I left because I refused to become what it required, smiling while people call it grace. For a heartbeat, no one spoke. Then Graham exhaled slowly, almost a sigh. Perhaps that's the tragedy, he said. You keep running from the stage, but somehow you always end up back in the spotlight. Her eyes flashed. Maybe the spotlight keeps following me because people like you can't stand when a woman refuses to bow. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. The line hit harder than he'd expected. The audience stirred. Someone clapped once, stopped, realized it wasn't safe to take sides. Graham looked down at his notes, meaningless now, and set them aside. "All right," he said quietly. "Let's call this an honest conversation." "It always was," she replied. "Then here's an honest question. Do you ever worry that one day the sympathy runs out?" Her jaw tightened, but her voice was calm. "Empathy isn't a currency, Graham. You don't spend it. You earn it. And if people stop paying attention, then maybe they were never listening." He nodded slowly, almost respectfully. "You've rehearsed that one." "I've lived it." The words hung between them, pulsing with quiet defiance. The floor manager gave the cut signal. The red light above camera 2 blinked off. Commercial break. The studio exhaled collectively, the spell broken for now. But neither host nor guest moved. They stayed frozen in their places, staring across the gulf of the red sofa. When the applause sign finally lit again, it was hesitant, fractured, half the room clapping, half still stunned. Off camera, Graham turned slightly toward her. "We'll pick up with lighter questions after the break." Meghan smiled without warmth. "You can try." He looked at her for a long second, then nodded once. "Oh, I intend to." The floor manager counted down, back in 5, 4, 3. As the red light blinked on again, both straightened. Faces reset, smiles reapplied. But something fundamental had shifted. The conversation had crossed a line that no makeup artist, no publicist, no producer could smooth over. This wasn't an interview anymore. It was a reckoning being broadcast to millions. The return from commercial felt like walking back into a room where the argument had paused mid-sentence. The purple wash of the set looked colder now, as though the bulbs themselves had lost patience. The audience wore the brittle smiles of people who had laughed too long at something that wasn't funny. The red tally light glowed. The show was live again, and yet nothing felt scripted anymore. Graham began the way only veterans can, by pretending nothing had happened. "Welcome back," he said, the cadence light, the grin precise. "We're here with Meghan Markle, actor, producer, advocate, talking about work, life, and the weather in California, which, I'm told, is simply unbearable." Polite laughter. It didn't travel far. Meghan smiled, television correct, dented at the edges. "It's warm," she said softly, "but at least the heat is honest." A delicate laugh from somewhere in the second row dissolved before it reached the band. Graham's eyes flickered. He made a choice only he could feel. If he let the interview limp toward the next segment, the moment would curdle anyway. If he leaned in, there was risk. But risk was why anyone watched live television. He leaned in. "Honesty," he repeated, drafting the word into his domain. "You've used it tonight like a standard. May I try a bit of my own?" She held his gaze. "If you can manage it." A ripple. The audience shifted forward. The band stilled. In the control room, no one breathed. Graham set his cue cards aside, palms open, voice lowered. "There's a sense, fair or unfair, that you leave rooms in flames and then return to describe the fire. That you curate harm in high definition. That you ask for privacy and then sell it by the hour. Is that misperception, or is that strategy?" The sentence settled like iron on the carpet. In the seconds that followed, you could hear the air conditioning. Meghan didn't blink. "Is that your honesty, Graham? Or the chorus you rely on when your own questions run out?" "It's the question millions have," he replied, steady. "And you know it." "Millions," she echoed. "Funny how people who hide behind numbers always want names." "Fine," he said, the steel faint now but present. "My name is Graham Norton. I'm asking." Something in the room tipped then, like a tray carried too far on one hand. The laughter cue didn't help. The audience ignored it. Meghan smoothed an invisible crease on the crimson sofa, and when she looked up, her composure had the stillness of glass. "You want a name," she said. "Here's one. Power. You perform it with charm. Others perform it with pity. The difference is cosmetic. He absorbed it without flinching. And yours? Boundaries, she said. Which is why I won't dress your accusation up with a pretty bow. He nodded as if they were colleagues negotiating lighting cues. Then I'll ask it plainly. Do you monetize grievance? There it was. The unvarnished, tabloid-shaped, ratings-tempting, dinner party question. The audience didn't gasp this time. They froze. Meghan exhaled once, so quietly the sound operator only caught the movement of her shoulders. Monetize work, she said. My grief, like anyone's, costs more than it pays. And yet it pays, he said softly. And yet it costs, she returned. He considered her, and when he spoke again, his voice had that disarming velvet he uses when a guest threatens to bolt. You're remarkably poised for someone who says this hurts. It hurts, she said, because it matters. It doesn't break me because I've already been broken properly. A single clap cracked the back row and died. The bandleader cut it with a quick shake of his head, as if applause might spook the animal the show had become. Graham nodded, respectful on the surface, calculating beneath. All right, he said. Let's test something gentler. Regret. Do you have any? Trust, she said. Everything else is a costume change. Trust in whom? People who like to borrow the word friend until it stains. His smile pulled thin. And the public? The public is not a person. It's a weather system. You dress for it. You don't marry it. He almost smiled for real at that. Almost. And yet you stand here, in the storm. That's where truth finds its shape, she said. He studied her, and the audience could feel him doing the arithmetic. Risk versus reward, empathy versus edge. He had another choice to make. The easiest path was to swerve into a soft anecdote about dogs or coffee preferences. The honest path was to follow the thread to wherever it snapped. He followed. You spoke earlier about performance, he said. Here's mine. I tease, I charm, I nudge the balloon until it squeaks. Here's yours. You suffer, you rise, you narrate the arc. Both are true, but one leaves room for other people. The other requires them to be props. Isn't that the real grievance people feel? Not that you speak, but that you keep everyone else trapped inside your story. The audience reacted like cold water had been thrown across their laps. A rustle, then stillness. Even the camera operators forgot to move their focus. Meghan did not break eye contact. When she answered, her volume didn't move, but the ground under the room shifted half an inch. It's not my fault, she said, if people only notice their reflection when the glass is clean. He held a beat long enough for a producer to whisper, "This is madness," and for another to say, "It's perfect." Then he put down the velvet dagger and used the blade. So no regret. No apology. Only explanation. The only people who need my apology, she said, know my number. And the people who don't, they don't get to bill me. Something flickered behind Graham's eyes. Fatigue, maybe, or the savage awareness that applause, when it finally came, would not wash this clean. He turned to the audience for a pressure valve and found none. Even the laughter sign seemed ashamed of itself. Let's try grace, he said, not smiling. What does it look like to you? Leaving people with their dignity, she replied. He let the irony sit there until it hummed. Will you leave me with mine? If you stop asking questions you don't want the answers to. The line should have gotten a laugh. It didn't. It created a corridor. At the far end of that corridor, something waited, a decision that would declare the whole night one thing or another, conversation or spectacle, boundary or bravado. Graham breathed in through his nose, out through his mouth. One more, he said. The softness in his voice felt like a warning to himself. Ask it, she said. He did. Do you think you're owed gentleness? The words surprised even him. They also liberated him. The performance dissolved. The host stepped aside. A man stood there, asking a real question. Meghan's answer arrived without armor. No, she said. But I refuse to pretend cruelty is a substitute. Silence. Not the kind that waits for a joke. The older kind. The kind that knows when two people have told the truth they came for. In that silence, You could feel the entire evening balancing on a blade. The audience leaned in because human beings always lean in when a tower either falls or refuses to. The floor manager took a single step toward the stage and then stopped, as if sound itself might shatter the moment. Graham nodded. He could have ended it there, thanked her, shifted the mood, thrown to music. He didn't. He broke the last seal instead. Then I'll be gentle, and I'll be clear, he said. This conversation stopped being useful 5 minutes ago. I won't turn my stage into anyone's courtroom. Not yours, not mine. And I won't pretend we're still entertaining our audience when what we're doing is trying to win. A visible ripple moved through the seats. Some people exhaled for the first time in minutes. Others froze harder. Meghan angled her body slightly toward him, a pivot both intimate and adversarial. Useful to whom? She asked. To the people who came to spend an hour laughing, he said. To the crew who will have to wear this moment on their faces for the rest of the night. To me, because my name is on the door. And to you, because my job is to stop before we both say something neither of us can outlive. There are words that end conversations without sounding like endings. Those were not the words. Those were a verdict. Meghan felt it. She moved her clutch half an inch closer with 2 fingers, a small calculation that read like a headline. You think you can dismiss me, she said quietly. No tremor, no flinch, just a hush before a very old door closes. I think, he replied, I can end my show the way I began it, on my terms. Your terms, she repeated, as if taste-testing the phrase. She stood up in one motion, elegant, decisive, the kind of stage movement that makes even the camera hold still. A handful of audience members gasped. One said, "Oh, God," too loudly and then covered their mouth. Standing, Meghan seemed taller than the lights. Graham remained seated a heartbeat longer by design. Then, with deliberate, measured control, he rose as well. They faced each other across the famous red sofa like figures on either side of a chessboard where the remaining pieces had become redundant. This is how you do it, she said, almost to herself. You wrap cruelty in courtesy and call it civility. He regarded her, and something in his face, tired, yes, but also unyielding, made the sentence she'd prepared falter. No, he said. I call it responsibility. The floor manager, sensing the end without instructions, moved to the edge of the set. The bandleader lifted his hands and then lowered them again. No music would know where to go. Meghan drew a breath that sounded like a decision. You'll regret this, she said, not spit like a threat, but delivered like a forecast. Graham's reply arrived at the exact pace of a closing door. I already do. That was the break. The fabric of the room tore without noise. The audience didn't applaud. They didn't boo. They did nothing, which is the loudest sound crowds can make. Meghan turned. Her heels, immaculate all evening, found the hardest surface in Britain and struck it clean, one step and then another. The cameras, trained by thousands of episodes to find the story, found her in profile the way history likes to draw it. Head high, shoulders square, a portrait moving through light. She did not look back. At the stage doors she paused, not because the script required it, but because endings deserve punctuation. She placed a hand against the bar, and for a blink the show became a still photograph. The guest leaving, the host not stopping her, the audience watching the space between them harden into something everyone would name differently tomorrow. Then the door swung. She disappeared. The quiet that followed was not relief. It was aftermath. Graham looked at the door for a count of 3. He wasn't a man who stayed at exits. He wasn't even a man who needed to. But for 3 counts he did, and then he turned back to the audience with a muscular professionalism that built his career. He straightened his jacket. The smile he placed on his face contained the exact number of volts necessary to reboot a room. Well, he said, voice light, posture exact. That went delightfully off-piste. Next week I promise someone who likes me. The audience laughed the way people laugh when their bodies need the permission. The sound held. It wasn't joyous, but it was alive. He let it breathe. Then he tapped the desk, a cue to know one and everyone, and the band found a neutral chord that didn't argue with the floor. In the control room, monitors popped back into color. Someone whispered, "We'll never top that." Someone else whispered, Pray we don't try. On stage, Graham's eyes softened by a millimeter. He hadn't won anything. He had ended something. Those are different trophies. He gestured toward the wings reserved for the next segment, the comedy bit with the oversized chair, a story about an actor's unfortunate parent. It would feel like switching from thunder to a wristwatch. Still, the show would proceed. That was the contract. He glanced once more at the space Meghan had left behind. The sofa remembered her posture the way leather remembers. He put his palm on the curve, not tenderly but as if steadying a ship that had just crested a wave. Then he withdrew his hand and turned to his audience, the people who returned every week because he knew how to carry a room from mischief to warmth and back again. "Shall we?" he said. They answered yes, in applause and relief and the promise that public memory is short until the clips arrive. Backstage, Meghan walked the corridor that all guests walk, except most don't register the sound their own steps make. The studio carpet muffled everything except resolve. She did not hasten. Staffers who had smiled at the beginning of the night practiced their best impersonations of wallpaper. She passed a poster for a previous season where she never appeared. She didn't look at it. At the exit, the door guard opened before she reached. Not deference. Timing. She crossed the threshold into the taste of night air where studio light ended. A car idled. The driver rose halfway, unsure of etiquette for moments television turns into weather. Meghan slid into the back seat without breaking her line. The car door thudded with the sound of a period. Inside, the driver asked no question. She offered no instruction beyond an address he already knew. Phones existed. So did tomorrow. For now, there was roadway, and the kind of dim street where nobody recognizes anyone unless they need to. Back on the set, Graham paced the last minute of the segment with the balance of a man walking an old, reliable bridge that now had one new crack he would learn by heart. He hit his marks. He delivered a line that brought laughter in the correct shape. He thanked a musical guest whose song had nothing to do with anything. When the red lights finally winked to black, the studio expelled its breath in a sound like rain on modern glass. After the applause, after the band put their horns in boxes, after the last audience member finished telling the first one they'd never forget this, Graham stood alone in the wash of the set lights. The sofa waited, an animal rediscovering its shape. He traced the air with 2 fingers, the way some people test the weather before stepping outside. Then he left the stage without ceremony, because ceremony would have made it a different confession. In the quiet hallway, he met his producer's eyes. Both men smiled the way professionals do when the titled emotion would be too expensive to carry. "Well," the producer said. "Book someone cuddly," Graham answered. "A Labrador in a tuxedo." They both laughed, and the laugh was real this time, the kind that returns to a room when it remembers itself. They walked toward notes and emails and a switchboard already glowing with opinions that would invent their own adjectives. There would be headlines that used words like eviscerates, humiliates, meltdown. None of those words were in the room when it happened. The room had older words: pride, boundary, choice. And though the cameras were off, the story continued, because that is the other contract. Shows end, narratives don't. Clips would multiply, angles would harden, millions of miniature verdicts would convene without chair or gavel. Some would say he silenced her. Some would say he protected his stage. Some would say they both finally said the quiet parts at the same volume. But in the last stillness before the night bent toward taxes and text messages, there was a simpler truth. A host decided his show would not become a trial. A guest decided she would not accept a sentence she hadn't written. Both walked in the directions their names required. Between those 2 decisions, an audience sat in a light the color of wine and realized they had watched a boundary drawn in public. Elegant, awkward, irreversible. That was the breaking point. Not the line that was crossed, but the one that was kept. The studio emptied slowly that night. The red sofa sat untouched under fading lights, gleaming like evidence of something unspeakable. Crew members whispered, still unsure whether they'd witnessed brilliance or disaster. Graham stayed behind, silent, tracing his fingers along the edge of his desk. For years, charm had been his armor. Tonight, it felt like a weapon. A producer finally approached. "She's gone," he said quietly. "Clips are already everywhere." Graham nodded, then let them breathe. We'll say nothing. By morning, the story had devoured the internet. Graham Norton humiliates Meghan Markle on live TV. Markle walks out. Each outlet picked a villain. Social media split into factions, outrage flooding every feed. One side praised his composure, the other condemned his cruelty. The truth lives somewhere between. Too complex for hashtags. Meghan watched one clip from her California kitchen. The camera caught her at her sharpest, defiant but alone. He looked tired, she whispered, closing her laptop. Meanwhile, BBC executives scrambled for statements about respect and miscommunication. None rang true. A week later, Graham returned to the same stage. The applause was louder, part sympathy, part curiosity. "Good evening," he smiled. "Tonight's guests have signed peace treaties." The crowd laughed, grateful to believe everything was fine again. Asked later if he regretted the moment, Graham paused. "No," he said, "but I learned something. Charm without empathy is just noise, and honesty without grace is cruelty." Meghan never responded directly. Instead, she posted a single line on her foundation's website. "Respect isn't agreement, it's restraint." The sentence spread faster than any interview clip. Months passed, and the night turned legend. A symbol of pride meeting pride, civility meeting defiance. Some called it bravery. Others called it arrogance. Everyone called it unforgettable. The red sofa remained in the studio, polished and avoided. No one sat where she had. And somewhere, oceans apart, both Graham and Meghan replayed the same thought in private. Some conversations don't end when the cameras stop. They only begin when the applause fades.